Hey there, and welcome to the first episode, the launch of TWT Podcast with yours truly, Dr. Jacynth, Joyce, and I'm super excited to be here. Now, the meaning or the heart behind TWT Podcast is that it's a space where we empower teachers through the conversations and the storytelling and sharing of past, present, and future teachers. We restore the dignity of our profession through challenging the status quo. Listen, our TWT family, we do not thrive in mediocrity. We are not basic, but we do all things in excellence, and we debunk myths with the help of our guests here on the TWT podcast. And so I'm super excited. The reason why we're here, what's the heart of it? Honestly, my first couple months of teaching, I went downstairs to the main office, and my principal at the time, Dr. Kwame Asante, shout out to you, just asked, he said, JJ, how you doing? You surviving? And I says, no, I'm thriving. And I had no business saying that my first couple months of teaching. If you can imagine, first couple months trying to manage classroom management, trying to navigate all the expectations placed on me as a teacher. First 3 months of teaching, parents' expectations that I placed on myself, administrative expectations, and state expectations because our school was heavily monitored by the state. And then the reputation of the district or things that I've heard. There are so many things that I had to battle through, things that I had to navigate, having the flu twice that year, my first year of teaching. But listen, I knew that my present circumstance would not dictate my ability to thrive or be able to show up for my students. And so when my principal asked me that question, I would always hear the phrase that teachers are surviving, right? Always in the survival. With what you have, with where you are. And so this podcast is a space to encourage brave conversation around the idea of things that keeps us stuck, things that keeps us in survival mode. We know that teachers operate mostly in isolation. That's the nature of the system, right? The system is created to thrive on the system. But we here at TWT believe that we're not going to survive because thriving dictates and supports our students thriving, their families thriving, our communities thriving, our societies thriving, and our world thriving. And so here at TWT, I just kind of want to share exactly the heart behind it. And it came really from my affirmation, my first 3 months of teaching. I refuse to survive. I'm only born to thrive. And I just want to encourage you, the same is true for you. You were not created to survive. You were born to thrive. And so I just kind of want to share the Latin meaning of education is educare, right? And some pronounce it educare, educere, but the meaning of education Latin actually means to bring out what is within. This is so exciting. To draw out, right? To bring out the divine qualities of the soul. Are you kidding me? Education, the goal, the heart of education, according to the Latin root of the word, is to draw out, is to bring out the divine qualities of the soul. I'm going to pose this question. What if we're getting teaching wrong? What if we're getting education wrong? And really, when we think of the history of education, this is where the doc student, right, is coming out. The inception of education, right, was believed to only be for the white elite boys. Girls were not in that equation. Black or brown children were not in that equation. They didn't believe even in female geniuses. And when Horace Mann, who standardized, went around as a superintendent to make sure that there was quality education for all, it was quality education for all, those included in education, but it was not equitable education because girls were only allowed to have up to 5 years of education to prepare them for what? Motherhood and marriage. So education was first believed only to be for white elite boys. No women, no girls rather, and no black and brown children. So what does that say about our system as we know it? We have made many steps forward, but certain things have not changed, right? We know that when immigrants started to influx in the United States, education was used for indoctrination. Education was used to prepare students who are in the system or immigrants to be able to give back to society in the factory jobs, in working to make sure the society and the economy is going. It was not meant to awaken, to bring about, to draw out the qualities of the divine, of the soul, the divine qualities of the soul. So from the inception of education, it wasn't about soul work. It was about repeating or replicating the skills needed in order to fill the positions that there were jobs needed in that society. Why do I bring that up? Education needs to change, right? And I do believe that Teachers Who Thrive is the space that is going to set education on a different path. I know we have pockets of great things happening, but on a global and a national scale, can we say that we're all thriving educationally? Can we all say that teachers are thriving educationally? Do we believe that all students are thriving? Why not? Because there's still disparities. There are still disproportionalities. There's still inequities in education. And my heart behind TWT is to open that space and have brave conversation around those topics and things that keeps us stuck in survival mode. And how do we move from surviving to thriving? I really want to read a letter that one of my former students wrote to me years ago, and that really convicted me about and had me to really reflect on what am I doing in the classroom that will allow my students to thrive. And so here's a letter. Dear Ms. Johnson, I would like to thank you for being a great teacher. I've always loved writing, so I automatically fell in love with your class, but the way that you carry the class inspires me. I used to believe that I was ugly with no place in this world, but seeing your confidence let me see the real me. You made me love writing even more. I also love how real you are. It takes a lot to be honest and confident. So thank you, and I admire you. Now listen, my students would write me letters at the end of the school year before they go on summer break, because I always ask them, hey, write me a love letter. I want something you've never had an opportunity to share with me, a favorite memory in my class, but something that you want to share from your heart. And over the summer, I would read them selfishly, because that would be the push for me to return after the school year had closed, right? If you are an educator, you understand over the summer break, sometimes you rethink, do I want to go back to it? And so reading their letters helped me to really understand the impact I was making, because I did not always feel that I was making an impact. I did not always feel that I was thriving. Oftentimes, I felt like I was operating in survival mode. But this young lady's letter really hit home, because it was not until after she left my class over summer break I read the letter. She did not return to school the next year, but I found out that she was living in her car, homeless with her mother. I did not know that she didn't believe that she was a beautiful person. But she said, the way that I carried the class inspired me. Yeah, she liked writing. She didn't share all the writing strategies that I shared, which I taught my behind off. She didn't talk about all the assessments that she took. She talked about how I carried the class inspired her. What did she mean? Well, I made sure that I drew out the divine qualities of every student's soul. I did the very best I could. And she said that she left the class knowing that she had a place in this world. She thought she was ugly, but the way I carried the class inspired her. What does that mean for us as educators? What does that mean for TWT Podcast? What does that mean for education on a whole? What if content was secondary and the soul work, pulling out, drawing out the divine qualities of every student's soul was primary? Would education be different? Will we have inequities as we have them? Would students feel less than? Would teachers feel less than? Would the profession itself get more worthy accolades or be looked upon as a respectful profession or respectable profession? And so I want to challenge you that who are listening, or those who are listening to this episode launch, the heart behind TWT is not to do education the way we've done it. It is doing its job. If you think centuries since education was created, much has not changed. We've made strides within the system, but the system itself has actually remained the same. We are creating people who can contribute to society in the financial world, right? Filling in those gaps or creating jobs for the economy. But when you look through the history, and I had to do that for my doc work, education really existed not for awakening the qualities that lie within the soul, the divine qualities, dreams, hopes being actualized, discovering or rediscovering skills and particular talents. And so my goal here as host is to have honest conversation, engage with past, present, and future teachers around thriving. What does thriving look like? Think about the pandemic, right? I do believe the pandemic, in many ways, it exposed a lot of things. But for the educational world, it exposed the inequities in education. It exposed the disparities that we find in education, not only in general education, but also in special education. But one thing that changed the most, and I feel like, as long I know for the New Jersey State, where I was serving as a professional development consultant, I do remember doing a podcast, we shifted our focus a lot from content heavy to more social emotional learning. For teachers at the state level, we made room for courageous conversations. We made room for healing circles. We made room for understanding and talking about trauma and trauma-informed practices. And why was that important? Because we started to move to, I believe, the more authentic, the heart, the truth behind education, which is to draw out, to bring up, and to pull out the divine qualities of everyone's soul, teachers, students, and administrators alike. And so I want to talk about this idea of trauma, okay? Now we know there was an ACEs study, adverse childhood experience, which was not even done on students. Do you realize that the Kaiser study that was done on over 17,000 participants, they were between the ages of 40 and 55 or 60. They were professionals, middle-aged professionals who are working, white men, white women, black men, black women, brown and black men and women. It was not done on children, but it was not until around the pandemic or a little before the pandemic occurred that we began to talk about adverse childhood experience as it relates to education, as it relates to showing up in our students every single day, because we realized that the world, it was in a state of panic. The world was in a state of loss. And so this Kaiser study that was originally done, adverse childhood experience, wanted to really link the relationship between the traumas that you face in your childhood years and how that really is connected to life expectancy, or either the vitality or the health of your adult life. Again, the study was not done on children, but we found, or rather students, but we found so much value and importance of the study, and now we're bringing it into the educational world. That was really important to talk about because now the conversation changed around, again, PDs from content heavy, from state assessments to now looking at trauma-informed practices, now looking at restorative practices. If you can hear, the language is changing in professional development. The language and the conversations are changing with teachers and administrators. How does that impact us in the classroom? Well, it should impact the way we teach. But now that we're a little far removed from the pandemic, if you will, unfortunately, we've now gone back to what has worked for us, but not necessarily has worked for the space of education. We've gone back to autopilot. We've gone back to test taking. We've gone back to not focusing on the health or the importance of relationships behind teaching, right? And so I want to talk about this idea, and I mentioned the phrase revival, right? And that phrase you typically don't hear as it relates to the educational space, but I do believe the pandemic made room for revival. The pandemic in the educational space has made room for things to be exposed, inequities, challenges, teachers really reflecting on not only their practice, but the current state of where they are, their health in their body, their mind, and their soul, right? Their part that they play in the educational space, and wondering if the educational space is even the space for them, thinking about everything that we've been going through, all that we've been pouring in, and now the weight and the responsibility with all these mandates now placed on us. But If the pandemic exposed the realities that we face as a system of education, I want you to listen to this definition of revival, which I'm really excited about. Revival, noun. It's an act or instance of reviving, a state of being revived, a renewed attention to or interest in something, a new presentation or publication of something old, a restoration of force, validity, or effect. Now, I really want to talk about revival as it relates to a new attention to, because the pandemic brought us to a place of a new attention to how we do education. Not sure where we took a couple steps back, but when we think of revival, taking a new interest in something, and I do believe if you're watching this podcast launch, you have a renewed or a new attention to education as we know it. You also believe that you were not created to survive, but you were born to thrive. You also believe that there's more to just teaching or transferring information of content. You believe that thriving comes with transforming lives, transforming hearts, transforming souls, reviving and pouring into and drawing out the divine qualities of the souls that you teach. A new presentation of something old. Can I submit that I want to present that the way we've been doing education, the system on a whole, there are pockets of hope, there are pockets of light everywhere, but on a whole, have we been doing the system, the thing of education wrong? Now, I do believe, this is just my belief, the system is working exactly the way the system was built to work. However, those who've been in a system and believe that the system itself that was just created to fill positions in society, to indoctrinate immigrants who were coming into the United States of America, to advance the white male boys as geniuses, but not believing, rather the white elite boys, but not believing in females to be geniuses and only preparing them for motherhood and marriage with limited education. When we look at the history of education, I want to present something that, although it was built with that in mind, let us consider, let me represent this idea to you that we are dealing with not just jobs of teachers or students. We are dealing with divine souls, right? We are dealing with souls. We're dealing with hopes. We're dealing with dreams. We're dealing with talents and abilities that can transform our world. In one of our future episodes, my guest talks about we are teaching to millionaires in our presence. But some of these skills and these abilities are not actualized because we're teaching to the content first. Let me submit to you that the content that we teach is just a vehicle to get to the souls of our students. Soul care, self-esteem work, empowering our students is a primary work of education. It is to draw out, right? It's to bring forward. And content is just a vehicle that takes us there to building those relationships with those students. And so I'm ready for revival, okay? I don't know about y'all, but here at TWT, we believe revival is happening. Let this podcast be the revival. Every conversation I have with my guests, I experience revival. My mind is renewed and building that relationship. How about your students can come back or write a letter like this student did, and I had no idea. But I am confident and I am blessed to know that she walked out of my classroom feeling more beautiful than when she came in. That was revival. I am blessed that she walked out of my classroom knowing that she had a place in this world. That was revival. I pulled out, I was able to wake up or to help come alive the truth about who she was. She was beautiful. And no matter how she came into the classroom, hair was untidy or maybe clothes looked a particular way, I would come over, I would gently brush her hair, or I would make sure she felt apart. I had no one make any comments on her appearance. I had no idea that I was speaking into her soul in the way I was, but I'm grateful that I found or I understood that how I manage my classroom, how I thrive as an individual impact my students' ability to thrive, their family's ability to thrive, their community's ability to thrive, society, and their world. And so another thing that I want to submit to you is this idea of intervening or interceding, right? And so if you've been tracking with me, you understand that I believe Teachers Who Thrive is a space where we empower teachers, where we restore the dignity of our profession, right? Through debunking, through challenging the status quo, through debunking this myth that we're only survivors, that we work in isolation, that we don't live on community, that really the profession is not respected or it's not as valued because of the pay that we receive. And to be fair and to be honest, I do believe the teaching profession has become less respected over time. But that's the heart behind TWT. We want to present something new to you from something that you've known before, or a misconception or an assumption you've had about teaching or education on a whole. So let's talk about this idea of interceding or intervening. And I really love this word because I do believe I am, in many ways, interceding. I am standing in the gap. And a person who intervenes, so a person who intercedes is a person who intervenes on the behalf of another. Okay, hey y'all. Especially, we know, obviously, through prayer. But when we look at that word intervene, and I don't know about y'all, but I have prayed for my students. When I was in supervision, I have my teachers in my thoughts and prayers all the time because I understand the weight of what they navigate as a teacher, the realities of what they go through. But let's talk about this word intervene, okay? It is to interfere with the outcome or course, especially of a condition or process, as to prevent harm or improve its functioning. Woo, I want to say that again. To intervene also means to interfere with the outcome or course, especially of a condition or a process, to prevent harm or to improve its functioning. And so I want to push a pin and I want to land here. I know I've been saying a lot, but I hope you've been following me that I believe every teacher has the ability to thrive. The reality of school, right? Every teacher has the ability to thrive, doing the best they can with what they have and with what they know. Of course, it's a process. And with thriving comes evolution. With thriving comes change. With thriving comes learning. With thriving comes a vulnerability to say, I know what I know and I don't know what I know, and I'm going to ask from it. But it also is a point of community. And so with this idea of intervening and interfering, I want to interrupt the status quo with this conversation. I want to interrupt the status quo of education with this podcast. I want to interrupt and intercede and intervene with the outcome of the status quo, doing school, doing teaching the same, with every conversation I have, with every guest that I encounter. And so I want to prevent harm. Is educational malpractice for us to prepare a lesson plan with us in mind, not our students in mind, not their hopes, not their abilities, not their dreams, not their ethnic backgrounds, not their religious backgrounds in mind, not their gender backgrounds in mind, not their ethnic background, racial background, socioeconomic backgrounds. It is educational malpractice. It is harm not to be teaching to the souls of these students, because at the end of the day, when we teach, when we've transferred our content, when we said all we needed to say, what have they walked out of our class with? Are they made the better because they were in our class? Can they navigate life outside of this building, or only preparing them for the test? And are we only preparing them to navigate and ace the assessments that we give them in our classroom? Not so. That is not our job, and that is educational malpractice. Are we going to improve the function of the way we do education with this podcast? Absolutely. And I'm here to do it. And I so hope that you take this journey of navigating the TWT podcast with me, yours truly, Dr. Jacynth Joyce, because after my years of teaching, my years of serving as an instructional coach, and my years of serving as a supervisor over 2 middle schools, then subbing, which I sub to stay at the pulse or the heartbeat of teaching, and then navigating my educational journey and accomplishments, I've seen a lot, and I've seen patterns and trends at the state level to understand that if we continue to go the route that we're going in, we will continue to do harm to the souls of our students, to the next generation. And this is not to scare you, but this is to inform you to say, you can do something about it. And I challenge you to be the revivalist, to be that change, to present something old in a new way. I challenge you to intervene, to stand in the gap. I challenge you to improve the system by you being there. I challenge you to shift your belief, your mindset about those students that you stand in front of, that you teach. Is there bias standing in the way? Do you have judgments? I ask, when you join this podcast, you suspend all judgments, that you lean into the courageous and brave conversations that we have with our guests. I want to challenge you. It may be uncomfortable, but we're here to challenge the status quo. You are not created to survive. How dare you think you were created to survive? And I know the system is set up in a way that keeps teachers isolated. And there are pockets of hope everywhere. But I want to challenge you to challenge yourself. You will not merely exist. You will not merely survive. You were born to thrive. And I do hope that what you find here with TWT family is a place of inspiration, a place of empowerment, a place of education, but also a place where you feel like you can continue to grow along this journey of thriving. And so I so hope that you come along, bring a friend, bring a colleague. And if you want to join this podcast and have conversation with me as well, the information will be in the link below this video. But again, I just want to say from the very bottom of my heart, welcome to the TWT family. Welcome to Teachers Who Thrive podcast with yours truly, Dr. Jacynth Joyce, as we empower educators through the stories that we share, restore the dignity of our profession by challenging the status quo, and debunk myths with the help of our guests, past, present, and future teachers. Again, I'm Dr. Jacynth Joyce with Teachers Who Thrive podcast. The currency of our podcast is in your like, your share, and your subscribe. And so until next time, remember, you were not created to survive. You were born to thrive. Until next time.